Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Fuhrman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. Imagine that you're in your mid-30s to early 40s and you feel called to make dramatic changes in your life. How would you do this? Would you pull up stakes and follow your intuition into an amazing new life? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Bridget Finclaire, did just that. Bridget Finclaire is an author and spiritual teacher with almost 30 years of experience. She's a qualified and experienced psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and healer, and was a professional therapist in London's Harley Street. Bridget left England in 2012 for Cape Town, where she now lives with her South African husband. She loves teaching, writing, and speaking. Weaving together the threads of her spiritual and professional journeys, she designed The Bone Circle, a unique, transformative, and life-changing program that ties together three significant areas of expertise: intuition and creating, the sacred and the metaphysical, and therapy and healing. Her website is bridgetfinclaire.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and the novel spawned by her experiences and heralded as the new Eat, Pray, Love, Red Dress. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus, Bridget Finclaire. Welcome, Bridget.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here with you, Victor.
And thank you so much for joining us today. Bridget, please tell us about your early path and how it manifested into a spiritual journey.
That's such an interesting question. And I think a lot of spiritual people, when they look back, maybe don't know precisely when it happened. And I have a kind of theory that perhaps many of us on this spiritual path chose that before we even incarnated. And I certainly think that's true with me. My beginnings were actually quite challenging. And I think, again, that's a common theme with people who are on a spiritual path, that something sometimes kicks them into awakening. Sometimes that could be a grieving or some kind of trauma. But for me, I chose, and I think the soul does choose the family for learning purposes. I chose quite a challenging family. I was the only girl with three older brothers and a younger brother. And a lot of people used to think, oh, that was wonderful, they must spoil you. Well, they didn't. They used to tease me and humiliate me, and it was quite challenging. And my parents were also very challenging, interesting characters, very larger than life, charismatic and fun to be around, but also narcissistic. So very, very self-centered. And I kind of felt a little bit like the Cinderella, the slave girl, looking after everybody else. I think both my parents had difficult relationships with the feminine, with women. My mother certainly did. She liked to be around men, and my father was quite misogynistic and just liked to flirt with women. So it left me in a very, very strange place. But obviously there was no overt abuse. It was much more of an emotional erosion, if you like. And of course, you don't know that when you're growing up. You think this is all normal. I absolutely thought our family was normal. In fact, I was told by my parents that we were special, because obviously that narcissistic streak, we're special, we're better, we're more important than anybody else. So I thought I was having this wonderful life. And I couldn't quite work that out. There was a cognitive dissonance going on. But I ignored it and just fitted in and did what I needed to do to survive in that family. And I think that creates somebody who's very empathetic and who's also a people pleaser. So that's where I kind of landed up. And at the age of 17, I thought, this is not normal. I can't live this anymore. I need to leave. So I actually left home at the age of 17. And in those years, I used to think there's something wrong with my parents. Well, later on, I used to think, no, it's not them. It's obviously me. I was just a teenager. I need to get my act together. There's something wrong with me. So I then started what I would call fake it till you make it. So going into my sort of late teens and early 20s, I would just fake that everything was fine with me, even to the extent in my mid or sort of early 20s, I moved to London to live in London and to work in public relations. And it was the 80s when success was the big thing. And I just put on this absolute act, this puppet self, if you like, that everything was hunky-dory. But of course, inside it wasn't. And inside I was having quite difficult, challenging times. I was picking terrible relationships, quite dysfunctional relationships, which were hurting me. And I would put on a brave face and pretend everything was okay. And eventually, it was really what really pushed me firmly into the spiritual path. If I look back, it was always there. I was always interested in the alternative. I had an imaginary friend when I was a child. My grandmother used to be quite psychic. I was always interested in this otherworldly stuff. But really, at the age of 30, I had my daughter. I actually had a son shortly after, 2 years after that. But having children, I realized that my parents were perhaps not the role models that I wanted to be a parent, and I wanted to be the best parent I could be to this child, this beautiful baby that I'd had. And I didn't have much support from my ex-husband, and that's really made me decide to go and have therapy. So I went and had counselling and psychotherapy, and that started to unravel what was going on in my childhood and my family of origin. And at the same time, I had a really keen interest in things like feng shui and Chinese things and Tai Chi and energy work. And I had a friend who was a Reiki master, and she wanted her house to be feng shuied. And she said, why don't we do a swap? I'll train you as in Reiki. So that was really, these parallel paths started. On the one side, there was the therapy to resolve the traumas and the dysfunctions of programming, if you like, that came from living in that quite challenging family. And at the same time, there was this spiritual path. And then years later, those two paths came together. And of course, over time, I was able to process all of that stuff and forgive my parents and love them unconditionally for who they are, realizing that it was them being the way they were that actually made me who I am today. So it's been an interesting journey, and I think it's one that we have forever. So there's always things that we're uncovering. We're always growing.
Your new book is called Red Dress. It is a novel, but I dare say perhaps semi-autobiographical?
Yes, in some ways it is. I mean, it is a fiction. It's completely fiction and fictionalized, and the characters are a fiction. But the sort of series of events, if you like, are loosely based on my own life. So the central character in Red Dress is called Katie, and she's a psychotherapist in Harley Street, which I was, and she's living in West London with 2 teenage children, and her marriage isn't very supportive, which is also true of my journey. Where we differ is that she's only just starting onto a spiritual journey, and she's going with some trepidation, sort of thinking to herself, oh, she's sitting on the fence. She's not sure whether she's going mad or whether it's true or whether she wants to step fully into that journey. Whereas for me, that journey had been going for a long time. So there are aspects of me in other characters as well in the book. She has her psychotherapy supervisor is a guy called Terry, and there's some aspects of me in Terry. And she has a best friend called Shanti who knows everything about everything spiritual. And part of me is Shanti, and she's also guided by a benevolent voice, and of course part of me is the voice. So there are aspects of me within the novel, and the events of her life loosely follow mine, but it is a fiction.
How did you choose the title Red Dress?
That's an interesting question. Go through, I think, lots of different titles when you're writing, and my first manuscript was actually called Alchemy by Numbers, and I did a small reading, and people thought it was going to be about numerology, and so I thought, I'm leading people down the wrong path here. I didn't know what to call the novel, and Red Dress kind of was one of the working titles, and I happened to mention it to a group of friends, and one of the ladies there said, oh, Red Dress, I'd buy it if it was called Red Dress. So I thought, right, I'm going to call it that. And the reason it's called Red Dress, you'll see when you read it. I hope people will read it because it's an interesting page-turning novel. But she goes at the beginning to have Aura-Soma, a consultation. Many of you will have heard of Aura-Soma, which is a whole system of working with color, vibration. And in fact, all the things in Red Dress are real authentic things that you can go and do if you fancy them. And she gets to have to wear whatever the bottle is that she's wearing. So she ends up wearing some awful color combinations that don't suit her. And right at the end of having worked through these series of 4 different Aura-Soma equilibrium bottles, she's finally free of these things, and she's worked it all through. And she comes out of the shower and she goes to get dressed, and she opens her wardrobe and she's looking at the entire wardrobe, and she realizes that she's no longer being dictated, and clothes are not being dictated by these bottles anymore. And she's free to wear whatever she likes. So she's kind of looking through the whole wardrobe thinking, what am I going to wear to an event that she's going to? And as she's looking, she hears a voice in her head that just says, red dress. So she picks the red dress, and you'll have to read the book to find out what happens. It's quite a pivotal point within the story.
Absolutely. With the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, many women and men have been re-examining their lives and contemplating change, especially in terms of spirituality and self-expression. What advice would you offer them?
Well, for a start off, I do think this is a wonderful gateway moment and an opportunity to reflect and go within and look at that. It's, in a way, that's the silver lining of the pandemic, isn't it? That we've come off the treadmill of busyness and we're able to sit and reflect and realize that there's more to life than the sort of traditional markers of success, which very much reflects in Red Dress as well. So I would say that if you're looking to change your life and go into a more spiritual journey, this is a wonderful time to do it. And I think there are a couple of things that I would advise. And first of all, the power of choice is huge. When you choose to do something, the universe conspires to help you. So just the act of choosing, I think there's more to life. There's more than my 5 senses are telling me. I feel that there's something inside that's empty and I'm looking to fulfill something more. Just the choosing to find something more, or choosing to open up to more, or choosing a spiritual path and intending that can be the thing that initiates it. So I think that's a very, very important starting point. But I would say that throughout everything I've done over 30 years of a spiritual journey, and there's many wonderful, wonderful practices, but the most important, the one that I would never want anybody to take away from me, is meditation. Now, it doesn't have to be a particular type of meditation. It could just be stillness. The act of sitting in stillness and in silence, I think, is probably the most powerful thing. Because it allows the monkey mind to stop, allows things to rise so that you can see them. And then that's becoming aware. And raising consciousness, becoming more conscious, is becoming more aware. And we can only become aware when we stop the chatter and find that stillness. And that's, I think, when we can connect to something greater than ourselves, to source, to the divine. So meditation or stillness and silence, I think, is a very, very powerful practice to start with, and you'll find that your path opens up from there. And everybody has their own path. I believe truly that there are many, many, many paths to the place of light, and it's as if we're all climbing a pyramid, and when we get to the top we'll realize we're all going to the same place, but the path you take will be yours uniquely and will unfold, and you just have to allow it to unfold and take each step as it comes.
It's interesting that you shared that the age of 17, was a major turning point in your life. In 1970, I was 17, at a very transitional point in my life, facing many questions. As a fan of the Moody Blues, I was thrilled at the release of their album, Question of Balance. And when I heard Justin Hayward's title song, Question, it became my personal anthem. I was especially moved by the lyric, and when you stop and think about it, you won't believe it's true that all the love you've been giving has all been meant for you. So many of us on spiritual and healing paths are so ready to give to others, often at the expense of our own self care and self love. Why do you think this is so, and how may we embrace and embody this?
Well, first of all, I know that album because my ex-husband used to be a big Moody Blues fan. What a wonderful lyric as well. So I think the reason that so many people on a spiritual path give to others kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that many people, not everybody, but many people on a spiritual path have had something that's jolted them onto that path. And that for me was that challenging childhood, and for others it could be other things. So I think that those challenges teach us to be empathetic, so we're got an understanding that we're connected, and we have an understanding of what other people are feeling, and I think we want to help to heal that. So many people on a spiritual path, maybe at the beginning, are kind of in a people-pleasing mode because of childhood or because of trauma. And I think that those challenges shifted you onto the path, but somehow it can be that we feel that we've got a lot of love to give and we want to help the world. And I think that's possibly to do with the soul. The soul knows that as a spiritual person on a spiritual path, that we are here to serve. We're here to serve others. We're here to serve humanity. And somehow we know that. And I think what happens is, one of the things that I teach in my training, the Bone Circle, is that we have a greater self and we have a smaller self. And for me, we are the greater self, which is this luminous, wonderful, divine self that's whole and complete. And we have a smaller self, which is the conditioned ego self, which is actually here to keep us safe. And the conditioned self sometimes gets it a little bit wrong. So we know we're here to serve, but then it thinks that we need to serve others before ourselves, and thinks that serving ourselves is selfish, which it isn't, and also maybe believes that they have to serve others or help others or love others in order to be worthy and lovable. And that comes from our own wounding. And I think we're all wounded in relation to the greater complete wholeness of ourselves and the greater complete wholeness of love. And it can just get a bit skewed, if you like, by the ego self. And so it ends up with a lot of spiritual people helping everybody else and not helping themselves. And I think we have to learn to overcome that, and it probably comes further down the road when we become more self-aware, and then we can make a commitment to ourselves and to look after ourselves, because we do need to get our own needs met. And I used to tell a story when I was a therapist to people who were, giving themselves away all the time to the point of exhaustion, which I've also done, and burnout, which I've also done, is that, when you travel on an airplane and they give you all of the safety instructions, they say that if the plane goes into some kind of situation, the oxygen masks come down, and they always say, put your own oxygen mask on first before helping anybody else, including your own children. And I think as parents, our first reaction is to put that mask on your child straight away. But we have to look after ourselves first. And it's the same with love. We need to love ourselves and look after ourselves. It begins with ourselves, really. But many spiritual people, it's the other way around. It begins with everybody else.
Including safe boundaries.
Safe boundaries are absolutely massive, and I think that's probably one of the things that most spiritual people have to eventually learn, because otherwise they'll burn out, to have those boundaries. And I think when you have those boundaries in place, you're able to be more compassionate, because you can still put a boundary in place and say, this person's behavior is not okay. But that doesn't mean I don't love them unconditionally at a higher level for who they are. But this behavior is not okay, so I'm not going to allow it. And I think a lot of spiritual people do allow behavior that is hurtful to them. And they think because they've got to be spiritual and compassionate and loving, they have to just take that on board and it's somehow they've manifested it or created it. And that's not always the case. It is actually that the boundary isn't there. So yeah, very interesting point.
And one of my life lessons, something that I'm still learning today at my age, is that said compassionately, no is a complete sentence.
It's a big one to learn, and Victor, I'm still learning it. No is a complete sentence. I always have to try to back that up. No, because, but actually you're absolutely right. No is a complete sentence, and I find it, even now, I find it challenging. And I think we have to remember that often by saying no, what we're doing is saying yes to something greater.
Absolutely. My guest is Bridget Finclaire. Her book is called Red Dress. Bridget, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
Thank you. Yes, so you can get the book really anywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere that books are sold. You can go to the publisher's website, which is johnhuntpublishing.com. Search for Red Dress by Bridget Finklaire, and there was a lot of links on there to where you can buy it as well. You can buy it in ebook or a paperback, online, wherever you want to buy it. And if you want to know more about me, then the best place to go really is my website, bridgetfinclaire.com. It's spelt BRIDGET, for Freddie, INKLAIRE. It's an unusual name. I think that my family are the only Finclaires in the world, so you should be able to find me. And I'm also on social media. And I have a Bridget Finclaire author and spiritual teacher page on Facebook. You can find me there as well. But the website's a great starting point.
And please tell us about the Bone Circle.
The Bone Circle is an absolutely unique and transformative training, absolutely life-changing. And I don't say that lightly. I know a lot of people make that kind of claim, but it really is. And I've sort of developed it from various things that I've learnt over my sort of 25 to 30 years in various different areas. And I developed it about 3 years ago or so, and have been teaching it in person. And what I want to do is upgrade it and make it even better and put it online. But what it does is it enables people to create the life that they truly love, to create it on purpose, which means purposefully and according to soul purpose. So they're tapping into that level of soul, you intuitively, and most importantly, learning to overcome the sabotage that the small self throws in the way. So there's a whole load of tools that I provide within the structure and framework of the Bone Circle, and we work together as a team to support each other. So if you think about any kind of hero's journey, you don't do these things alone. It's very hard to do them alone. We need all our friends around us supporting us, which is why it's a circle. But it brings together 3 areas of expertise. The one is therapy and healing. I was a psychotherapist for several years and a healer. I've been a healer for almost 30 years. So it brings together those, which is really around healing the past and unhooking things from the past that are possibly stopping us moving forward, or causing trauma, or causing depression or anger or fear. So that's kind of touching into that, which is dealing with the past. And then it brings in metaphysical teachings. So we're looking at lifestyle things like yoga and breath work and meditation and drinking plenty of water and eating properly and caring for the planet, and also working with sacred names and chants. So it's a kind of a place for coming into the fully present. So we're looking at the past and the present. And then the third circle of the Bone Circle is to do with intuition and creating, which is really tapping into your intuition to see where the future is, so that we can create that according to our soul. And it really, the overlap of those 3 areas is the Bone Circle. So it's taught in different stages. You can just take the first easy stage, which talks much more about being in the creative orientation rather than reacting and responding. And you understand you've got a greater self and a small self, and the small self is keeping you safe, and the greater self wants you to go out there and flourish. And you can take it right up over 5 different levels. And on the fifth level, or the higher levels, you get to do a meditation where you create a thing called your gift of life, which is the life you're here to live, everything that you would love. And they're not necessarily material things, by the way. They're things like the career you're meant to be doing, using your talents and skills on purpose, the relationship, the place where you're meant to live, the work you're meant to be doing, the people you're around that are fulfilling, that are utilizing your skills and talents and your passions and putting you in a flow space. So it works quite a lot with intuition and with greatness and with creating, and then there's the other bits in there as well. So it's quite a profound training, and I absolutely love it, and the people that do it with me love it. There's a lot about structure, and I think the first time people go into the bone circle, what they're doing is actually shifting structures internally. So it's not an external manifestation. You shift the structures within yourself first, and then from there, it's as if you've been reoriented onto the proper path that you're meant to be on.
And we'll be back with more of Bridget Finclaire and a red dress after these words on the OMTimes radio network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
He was the heart of your family, and he taught you our history. He helped you fix your first flat. He was the best backyard DJ around. And every time he'd tell a story, he'd own the room. But now more than ever, he may feel alone. Today, older adults and their loved ones are struggling to connect, in a time when connection has never been more important. But there is something we can do. Embrace our older loved ones through StoryCorps Connect. With StoryCorps Connect, you can honor seniors remotely with an interview about their life. Every interview will be archived at the Library of Congress, becoming part of American history, so that years from now, future generations can listen in.
All right, Grandpa, what's one piece of advice you have for me?
Just 3 words, sweetheart. Live with courage.
The man that had the best stories still has plenty of stories to tell. So connect virtually and share the conversation of a lifetime at storycorpsconnect.org/AARP. Connect, honor, share. StoryCorps Connect. A message from AARP, StoryCorps, and the Ad Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Bridget Finclaire. Her book is called Red Dress. Bridget, my spiritual path reopened in my late 30s. At the time, I was attending a series of New Age gatherings at the home of a lovely woman in her mid-80s. On one occasion, I did not resonate with the presentation that evening. Our hostess noticed this and asked if I would stay for a few minutes after everyone left. When they did, she took me in a very motherly way. She took my hands, looked into my eyes, and said, "Victor, God does not require us to be holy, but would love for us to be whole." That wisdom changed my life. How may we examine our lives and find our wholeness?
What a beautiful thing to say to you. That was fabulous. I think really at some level we are all whole and complete. And that's where I would go with the bone circle, that greater self is already whole and complete. And we have everything we need within us. But what happens is the wounding that we go through that creates the ego self or the small self believes that we're incomplete. So that incompleteness means that we're constantly searching for the thing that will complete us before we go and create what we're here to create. And I think one thing that we can do is understand that we are already whole and complete. And if we see ourselves as whole and complete, then we can learn to tune out the critical voice of the small self that says you're not enough, or you're not lovable enough, or you're not strong enough, or you're not powerful enough. It's always a you're not enough of something. Or, you don't have the capacity, you don't have what it takes, you can't trust, whatever it is that's making us feel incomplete. It's about understanding that that's a wounding and it's not a true reflection of reality, however strong that may feel. And so I think that's the first thing really, is to understand that we are whole and complete. It's only the ego that is separate and sees separation. It's only the ego that feels that we're not enough because it's wounded in relation to that wholeness. And so you can turn down the volume on that, and then you don't have to seek to find whatever's going to complete you and make you whole, because you're already whole. And then you can ask yourself, well, what would I do if I knew I was whole? What would I be doing differently? What would I be doing in the world? So I think that's one aspect of that question. And the other thing I would say is connecting with something greater than yourself. And that may be the divine or source. That could be through meditation or stillness, which we already talked about, or through yoga, breath work, Tai Chi, all of those sorts of things, or it can simply be walking in nature. I think we all can be arrested by the beauty of nature. If you see a fabulous waterfall or the ocean or dolphins or beautiful bird song or a rainbow, a sunset, the beauty of a newborn child, animals in the wild, our pets, those sorts of things, we see the beauty of nature and we can see the love and the peace that emanates through that. And I think we can have that taste of honey, of seeing that we are part of that. We're part of something much, much bigger. And that can help us to feel more whole as well. So I think those are the things that I would recommend, is acknowledging that you already are whole and choosing that, and choosing to turn the volume down on the critical voice, finding your stillness in your own path, and connecting with the grandeur of nature.
That reminds me of another Moody Blues lyric from the album To Our Children's Children. It said, "With the eyes of a child, you must come out and see that your world's spinning round, and through life you will be a small part of a whole of a love that exists. With the eyes of a child, you will see."
That's beautiful. I love what you're saying about the eyes of a child as well, because one of the things, going back to the bone circle, is that I do a meditation with people to take them into innocence. It's a whole meditation, like a kind of hypnotic meditation or a shamanic meditation that takes them into a space of innocence. And innocence, if you break that word down, is in no sense. We're not trying to make sense of anything. We're not cataloguing it with all of our past experiences. We're seeing with that awe and wonder that a child sees with. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think it's something we lose touch with as we grow older, and we kind of get conditioned to be in the world and, go and get a job and pay the bond or the mortgage, or we get caught in life, and then we lose that innocence of the eyes of a child. But a beautiful quote.
Most of our listeners are women, many teachers and practitioners of yoga and various healing modalities. If they had an opportunity to meet your character, Katie, in Red Dress, what would she share with them?
I think that they would start off, they'd love Katie because there's so much in common with them and Katie. She does meditate, she does do yoga, she is a Reiki master. And I think that they will relate to her completely and fully. But I think what Katie would probably say, I mean, she's at the beginning of her journey and probably your listeners are much further advanced than she is. But I think what she would say to them is have faith that there's a greater power that's guiding you. Things are not always what they seem, but to surrender to that higher power. We're here to experience everything in this life, and even the challenging times can end up being really fruitful lessons or things that we learn or things that actually shift us to something better. So have faith that there's that higher, greater power that's guiding you and surrender to it. I think that's what Katie would tell them.
Many of us are familiar with Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. Is there also a heroine's journey?
Yes, that's a great question. There is. And there was a book by a lady called Maureen Murdoch, and I think it was written quite a while back now, late 80s, early 90s, somewhere like that, called The Heroine's Journey. And it's part of the text that I get my people to read when they come and do the Bone Circle. I think we probably both men and women have heroine's journeys, because I believe that we both sexes contain both the feminine and masculine energy, and we have to have that in balance. That's the yin and the yang. But the heroine's journey came about because Maureen Murdoch got to talk to Joseph Campbell, and she said to him, well, what about women? Can women go on the hero's journey? And Joseph Campbell said, oh no, women are the boon. You know, women are there like Penelope, you know, sitting and doing her tapestry, waiting for Odysseus to come back. Women are what men go out onto the hero's journey to win the heart of the woman. And she said, well, I don't think that really fits with modern women. Modern women don't want to be sitting at home, you know, just waiting for their man to go off and, you know, find the golden fleece or whatever it is and come back. She said there must be something more. So she looked at the heroine's journey, or she discovered the heroine's journey. And this is what she discovered. It's a really beautiful journey, because what happens in the modern world is that women don't want to be at home like Penelope, stitching and unstitching a tapestry, waiting for the husband to come home, waiting to be the boon. They want to go out into the world themselves. And what they do is, because of the way the world up until recently has been very much along patriarchal lines, with the masculine dominance in many, not always, but in many cultures, what happens is they have to step into the masculine to step into the world. Now, women have broken the glass ceiling in many places, whether that's in business as CEOs, or whether that's as lawyers, or whether it's even women prime ministers, women presidents. So women have managed to get into all the places that men formerly occupied, if you like, in most cases. There are some countries where obviously that isn't the case. But what happens is they have to take on the mantle of a man to do it. So they take on the hero's journey, and they take on the road of trials, and they take on their demons and their dragons, and they fight them and they slay them and they make it. But what happens is, because they've been taking a hero's journey, a masculine outward journey into the world, they get to a point where they suddenly feel it's a Pyrrhic victory, and they feel that they're empty inside, and they awaken to feelings of aridity. They feel that they're like a shell inside. They've got all of that success. They've made it in their career. Very often they're also married with a family that they're bringing up. They're doing it all, and they end up burning out. And a lot of women end up burning out because they're no longer listening to their own feminine rhythms. Because we're cyclical. Women are cyclical just by virtue of the fact we have periods and menopause and all sorts of things. We're cyclical. And we don't listen to that. We just go out there on that road of trials, taking that masculine journey, and we burn out and we become dry to that. And that's at the point where, on the heroine's journey, there's an urgent wanting to seek the feminine. Now, I think that can happen at different times in people's lives, not just women, but particularly women. It can happen when they have children around. We were talking earlier about sort of your mid to late 30s can be a very much a turning point. And I think that can be the case with women who've had a career and then want to have children and then feel like, what am I doing? You know, working all these crazy hours for all of these things when I don't spend time with my children. So it can be then, and if it's not then, it can often be at menopause. And then they go through a rite of passage because it's a seeking within themselves. So the heroine's journey is an internal journey, whereas the hero's journey is an external journey. The heroine's journey is an internal journey. So they're going in deep into the shadow, into the messiness within themselves. Because at some point, in order to take that external hero's journey, they've had to cut off from the feminine. And we would call that the mother-daughter wound, where they've rejected the mother and everything that the mother stands for, including Mother Earth, nature, and all of the things that the divine feminine are about, which is about nurturing and supporting and, working teamwork and all sorts of creative things, even things like baking and cleaning and sewing and gardening and all of those kinds of aspects of the feminine. They've kind of dismissed all of that to go into the big wide world to be successful. But because they are feminine and they've cut off from that, there's that yearning to go back to it. So they have to go within and go through the shadow and heal the past and heal that mother-daughter wounding, that separation from the feminine, and actually re-embrace the feminine. Because I think a lot of women who go onto that career path believe that the feminine is weak. You know, that there's a feeling that the feminine is weak, and it's come from the patriarchy, but it's not actually true. So they have this urgent feeling that they have to reconnect with that, and to reconnect with that, they have to work through their stuff, which is an internal journey. And many women don't feel very sociable at that time. They don't want to go out and do things. They want to just be at home with doing homebody things, you know, with their fingers in the garden, planting things or painting or making music or being creative or doing pottery or some other kind of creative outlet, which is very, very much needed, and the need to nurture. So I think even if women have chosen not to have a family, for example, there'll be a need to nurture. Whether that's working with an animal rescue or working with nature or doing something around ecology. But it's going back into the divine feminine and reconnecting with that. And that's the heroine's journey. And then you're healing that mother-daughter wound. You're then healing the maladapted feminine, if you like, which can come across as the critical. And then you'll also have to then heal the masculine within you. You have to heal that patriarchal, dysfunctional masculine within you. And so then eventually you come out of that heroine's journey with reconnecting back to the feminine and the mother, which is the archetype of the mother. So it's just not just the actual real mother, but the archetype of the mothering energy, if you like. So you've reconnected with that and healed the dysfunction in that and reconnected with the masculine, which we still also need, because that's the doing and the taking action and the going out there in the world. And then it's about getting them in balance. So that's the heroine's journey. It's a fascinating thing to look at, particularly for women. But I think many men as well get stuck on that road of trials. And
Absolutely. My guest is Bridget Finclaire. Her book is called Red Dress. We'll be back with more of Bridget after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Right now our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and experiences connect through conversation, and it feels good.
This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together. Start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Bridget Finclaire. She's talking about her book, Red Dress. Bridget, in the last 20 years, and we sort of touched upon this in the last segment, many women and men have felt a calling to the feminine divine. Is our world in need of that ultimate motherly love?
For sure, absolutely. And I think it's coming back now, even as we speak. We can even look at that in Scripture in terms of the return of the Holy Spirit and the return of the presence of the divine, which is where the word spiritual comes from. We're filled with the Spirit. And that Spirit, that presence, is seen in many religions and belief systems as being the feminine, the divine feminine. In the Hebrew, it's called the Shekinah, the she, it's the divine feminine. And I think that we can see that coming up with how people are beginning to awaken. More and more people are awakening to how we are connected, are awakening to what we're doing to our planet and how that needs to stop. So yes, I think the feminine is hugely important, and we're in this gateway moment right now where we really do need to embrace that and get it back into balance as well. Because I think for too long, the world's been run on sort of competition and who's going to win and who's going to get to the top and games of war and acquiring things, acquisition, competition and consumption. And that's got us into a really bad place. And as people awaken to a more spiritual journey, we're raising consciousness and we start to realize that we are connected, and that we rely on Mother Earth, that actually nurturing is important, that being there and carrying life is important. And for me, the feminine is the carrier of life. As I said before, we've all got both masculine and feminine within us, and we need to work to get them in balance. But women are actually the carriers, the literal carriers of life, because it's we that have a womb that actually can grow another being inside of our body. So we carry life through the womb. Very often we find that midwives and people like that are women. Doulas, birth doulas are often women. women can be around each other. I always think of the olden days when women would sit around a table, maybe doing a tapestry together or knitting blankets together or making meals together. And there's a real sense of community and supporting one another. There's a lovely saying that I love. It's an African one. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that going far together is very much part of the divine feminine. So I think women carry life right from birth, but we're also the nurturers. Men who are in touch with their divine feminine are also very much nurturers, the supporters. We think about everybody. We don't just think in a selfish way. It's, if I do this, how's that going to affect other people? Wanting to be of service in the world, wanting to help, wanting to make meaningful connection. All of that is what life is about, really. It's about relating and relationship. And I think that very much comes from the feminine. And then right at the end of life as well, I think women and men who are in touch with that feminine within them really understand the death process. And I think there's a need for people to really understand that. The death doula, the death process. And I think we need to have earth doulas now that are really looking after the earth and our connection to nature. And all of that, if we think of Mother Nature, interesting question, because I live in Cape Town and it's called the Mother City. So I'm living in the Mother City in Mama Africa on Mother Earth. So it's a triple feminine energy coming in, but it's very important that we embrace it now.
Absolutely. Part of your practice has been past life regression. Through this work, have you learned why we keep coming back?
We keep coming back. It's so interesting, isn't it? I think we just come back to learn and grow. For me, it's the soul is on this infinite path. The soul is infinite. It never dies. It goes on, and perhaps it goes on after this life or after this planet to other realms which are less dense. But I would say we're living in schoolhouse earth, and we're here to learn and grow. And sometimes that may be karmic things that we need to work through, but I don't think it's always that. I think sometimes it's just that the soul decides it wants to experience it all and wants to understand and have empathy and understand all facets of life. And that's how we learn and grow. And that's how we become empathetic. And that's how we realize we're all connected and have that empathy and greater love for humanity. And I think we do that by the experiences that we go through that shape us. So I think if you lived a life where you didn't grow spiritually or you didn't meet your challenges or grow from those challenges, then that situation will just keep repeating itself until you get the lesson. So I think that's probably why we come back. And sometimes we come back to resolve something that we'd left in a past life that didn't get resolved. So we need to have another life then to resolve whatever happened in the past. I tend to think of past lives as being, I believe that where we find ourselves in this system of things, if you like, this three-dimensional system of things, we're in a particular space and time, and it's disconnected from maybe eternal time and other concepts of time that are beyond what we can understand. And within our kind of bubble of time, or consciousness time zone, it's as if it's, remember when films used to be on DVDs, and the whole film is on that DVD. The whole thing is already there. The whole picture's already there. But you have to watch it through time. And if you think about past lives, it's as if the soul has a whole journey and it's all there and it's written on like an interactive DVD. So if you go back into the past lives, they're all happening at once, but you can go back into a past life, resolve something in that past life, and then that changes what's happening in the now, in the present, and that has a knock-on effect on what happens in the future. So anytime we can change what's going on in the future by going back and changing the past, but it's all actually happening at once. I think it's all really an illusion. So it's all just the soul's journey, I guess.
Someone said time is a river and it depends on where you put your toes into the flow.
Yes, and you can never put it into the same place twice, I guess. But if you walked up and down the river, you could, couldn't you? It's quite interesting.
My guest is Bridget Finclaire. Her new book is called Red Dress. Bridget, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about all of this wonderful work that you do.
Thank you so much. So Red Dress is available anywhere that books are sold. You can get it on Amazon, from Barnes & Noble. You can get it online, Kindle or paperback. John Hunt Publishing is my publisher's website. And if you go to johnhuntpublishing.com and search for Red Dress by Bridget Finklaire, it will give you a whole load of links where you can buy Red Dress. And you can also find out about me on my website. That's probably the best place to go. And it's www.bridgetfinclaire.com. It's BRIDGETF for Freddie, INKLAIRE. Slightly unusual name. So you should be able to find me there. And there are links on my website to all my social media pages. And there's also a page on my website about the Bone Circle training that you can go and take a look at.
And briefly share the Bone Circle information one more time.
The Bone Circle is a unique, transformative and life-changing program. There are different levels that you can take it at, and it helps you to create the life you've come here to live according to your soul's purpose. It's actually used to be taught in person, and I'm in the process of upgrading it so that you can learn it online from wherever you are in the world. So you just have to bear with me and give me a bit of time to get all of that recorded and up and running, but it will be coming soon. So if you are interested, just sign up for my newsletter and I'll let you know when it's complete and it's up and running.
Bridget, you are a veritable cornucopia of wisdom, and we barely scratched the surface on your life experience, including work in the paranormal. So we'll talk about that the next time you come on. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of this wonderful wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my absolute pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.